Yeah, hi, we are here at the ReSAKSS conference, second day in Addis Ababa, and we are lucky at ECDPM to have one of our guests, Robson Mutandi. Robson is the IFAD representative to Ethiopia. So we would like to ask you some questions about CAADP and how things are progressing after the Malabo Declaration. Maybe you can start by telling us how an important organization like IFAD sees the Malabo Declaration, if you think is a good step, or maybe there is anything missing in there.
I think very briefly, as IFAD, we've been involved in all the steps that were leading, the African Union steps that were leading towards the Malabo Heads of State meeting that finally endorsed the declaration. And our contribution and our participation in that process was principally to ensure that our clientele, our focus group, the rural farmers, are taken care of in that whole declaration. And we are glad that in the final analysis, in the declaration itself, it suits perfectly into our framework of mind, it suits into our mandate, and it therefore responds to some of the things that we have been talking about. It addresses a whole range of things, including broadening the agenda for addressing agricultural development in rural areas to include smallholder farmers and private sector engagement. So yes, we are quite happy to have been part of that process.
Thank you. Maybe my second question is about the issue of the role of the private sector, and there is a lot of discussion, and I think the spirit of the Malabo Declaration is exactly to work in partnership.
Yes.
But sometimes if different quarters have different opinion of what the private sector is, and some are afraid that the smallholder farmers may not benefit if all of the investment comes from large corporations, from also outside of Africa. So how does IFAD, who is a very, very important supporter, perceived to be like the World Bank just for the small farmers. How do you see this? Because you are very close to the small farmers.
Yes, that's very, very important for us to make sure that smallholder farmers are not lost in this big topic of private sector. You could hear this morning the private sector people saying farmers are private sector. Yes, they are private sector, but they're a special group of private sector, and we want to safeguard their interests. They could be small farmers, they could be big farmers. If you just generally say farmers are private sector, yes, they are private sector. But how do you ensure that the smallholder farmers, who are our primary concern for IFAD, take part in this whole process? And so, if our response to that has been to broaden the PPP, the 3 Ps, into 4. So we have the 4th P as the producers. And there again, just to re-emphasize the focus of the smallholder producers, yes, they are private sector, but their engagement in this whole arena, whether they are engaging with large firms or small companies, has unique requirements. And it's like Goliath and David, if you read the Bible. You need to make sure that these are two unequal partners who should play the game at an equal level. And so to safeguard the interests of the smallholders, we ensure that there's a 4th P in this whole arrangement. And we fully support the engagement of the private sector, the large companies, with us into this whole arena. And quite a lot of them have shown interest in working with us to develop this whole process with smallholder farmers.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned a 4th P in a public-private partnership for the producers, and this is a very, very interesting development. I was wondering then, why do you think is maybe the retailing business in the value chain a bit missing from the discussion? What can CAADP do to make sure that the distributors ultimately come on board? Yes. Sometimes we don't see them in this type of meetings.
Yes, even I think you could see that we don't have, you see, it's a process. And I say that in some other fora, I say you cannot bend a dry fish. When you try to bend it, it breaks. We are getting used to this. We were getting very comfortably used to a system where the traders, I'm sure that's what you're talking about. Yes. The middle income, the people, the middle level, the people who do the deals have been missing. They've been brutalized. They've been labeled as the guys who
the nasty guys.
The nasty guys. So to change the nasty guys into good guys, it's not very easy. And so this is the drive. So that change requires a lot of patience as we change the thinking. Look at, for instance, developing markets for smallholder farmers. There are millions of these guys. You cannot expect all these million farmers to suddenly go and sell things to Amsterdam. You don't expect them to all of a sudden to go and queue at the commodity exchange, even here in Addis. There has to be some aggregation at some level. within the countries, within the farmers groups. So we as IFAD are supporting the idea and promoting the idea that farmers should be organized into groups that then have a bigger competitive advantage and bigger comparative advantage. And then as groups, they can have better bargains, they can have better deals. And we have good examples here coming up also in Ethiopia, where farmers, irrigation farmers we're supporting, have ganged together to form marketing groups. And these marketing groups have got into what we call forward contracting deals with private sector companies in Addis. And they go back to report to their members that we've got a deal here, can you grow tomatoes for this company? And they can only do that as a group. But as individuals, it's going to be very difficult. So this kind of thing also, we'll see it as a challenge for intertrade within African countries. There are barriers, what we call non-tariff barriers and tariff barriers, but the non-tariff barriers are, in my opinion, most difficult to break in terms of opening the markets within the continent itself for cross-regional trade.
Thank you, Robson.